Good afternoon, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to this thematic track titled Accelerating Transformation, SDG Implementation, and Climate and Biodiversity Goals. I'm Ishita Srivastava and I work as a research associate here at TERI, and I will be your MC for this important session. Sustainable development goals are at the core of our efforts to build a more equitable, climate resilient, and biodiverse future. Today's discussions will bring together esteemed experts and policymakers to share their insights on achieving an integrated and accelerated approach to SDG implementation. To begin with, I invite Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General, the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI, to deliver the welcome address.
Very good afternoon to all of you, and I'm sure after lunch it's a little difficult, or I'll say challenging, for all of us to ensure that you are awake, and that will only be possible through very intensive discussions, and I'm looking forward to that. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this thematic track at WSDS. It's our 24th edition of World Sustainable Development Summit, and we are looking forward to celebrating our Silver Jubilee next year, and hope you all will be here with us celebrating that. Now, if we look at that, where are we today? It's a crucial moment in our global sustainable journey. With just 5 years remaining to achieve the 2030 agenda, the urgency to accelerate SDGs implementation has never been greater. And I'm still not talking about what's going to happen to the world with few countries withdrawing their support to meet this important objectives of SDGs. Now, the theme of today's session, Accelerating Transformation, SDG Implementation and Climate and Biodiversity Goal, and as I said, perhaps could not have been more timely, because the geopolitical conditions also ask us to take urgent actions. The Global Sustainable Development Report underscores the need for transformational pathways that integrate sustainable development with climate action and biodiversity protection. This discussion comes at a pivotal junction when nations, including India and Germany, are preparing their voluntary national reviews for the high-level political forum. These reviews, they do provide us an opportunity not only to assess progress, but also to identify gaps, strengthen synergies, and foster meaningful solutions for sustainable development. Today's session will focus on key questions that lie at the heart of accelerating SDG implementation. How can we integrate innovative approaches that align climate and biodiversity goals with sustainable development? Because most of the time, and especially if we look at the small island states, on the name of modernization, we are actually moving towards urbanization. And is this going to help, whether it is the impact of climate change or in long-term sustainability of small island states? It's also true for the hilly states in our country and many others. So therefore, to match the sustainable development goals with climate and biodiversity goals is something that requires lots of discussion. How can we intensify multi-stakeholder partnerships, ensuring that investments prioritize resilience and long-term sustainability? And finally, what structural reforms are needed to enhance SDG delivery and make our policies more responsive to environmental and social imperatives? Addressing these questions requires bold actions and collaborations. Governments, multilateral institutions, businesses, and civil society all have a role to play in creating systemic changes that align development goals with ecological sustainability. As you're aware, WSDS has always been a platform that fosters such dialogues, bringing together through leaders and decision makers to exchange insights and advance collective action. As we move forward with today's discussion, I urge you all to think about actionable recommendations that can translate into concrete outcomes. The road to 2030 is short, and the time to act is now and at a much faster pace. And I do look forward to engaging discussions and insightful takeaways from our esteemed panelists and participants. So thank you once again for your presence, and I do look forward to fruitful discussions.
Thank you, Dr. Dhawan. Now, to provide us with a deeper understanding of integrated and accelerated SDG implementation, we now have with us Professor Ambuj Sagar, representing the International Group of Scientists for the Global Sustainable Development Report 2023.
Good afternoon. I think Vibha has kind of thrown down a challenge for us speakers to make sure that you guys are awake during this session. So I will try my best to at least try to put some interesting thoughts in front of you that will hopefully be a cause for longer and deeper discussions in the rest of the session. What I'm going to be talking about really is some of the key messages from GSDR 2023. That is a report that's brought out every 4 years from the Office of the Secretary General. And I was fortunate to be a member of the group of scientists that actually wrote the 2023 report. And as you can see, the title of the report itself incorporates the word or the phrase accelerating transformations, and I'll get to why we actually chose that title and how our report gives some guidance on how transformations may be accelerated. First, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It's just a graphic that shows we're really kind of far from meeting most of the SDG goals. Everybody knows that. I'm not going to spend time on that. But the key message to take away from there is that if we are far away from the goals, we have to accelerate our progress. One of the key points made in our report was that there are interlinkages between the various SDGs. And therefore, in order to allow our action to become a little bit more easier to manage given the proliferation of the SDGs, is to think about different entry points, and this was basically building on the insights of the 2019 report, which had suggested these entry points as a way of basically being able to coalesce action so that you have fewer arenas to work on while being able to meet all the SDGs. So what you have on the screen is really kind of the first key message, which is understanding SD interlinkages, focus on those 6 entry points that are listed on the screen. And also there are these 5 levers you can use in order to enhance action on those entry points. The 5 levers are governance, economy and finance, science and technology, individual and collective action, and the lever that we added in that report, which is capacity building. So the first 2019 report identified the first 4 levers, and our report actually said that you do need attention on a 5th lever, which is capacity building. The question comes now, what do you do with the levers and how do you think about that, which is really the second central part of our report. Just to illustrate that, we picked up here our 4th entry point on energy decarbonization and universal access. And in order to enhance action on that, we really said there are 3 key shifts. You have to think about a shift on energy access, a shift on decarbonization, and a shift on this transition to sustainable energy consumption and demand reduction. Each of these is a transformation of a certain kind. And that is really the second and absolute central message of our report, that effectively all the SDGs and movement on these entry points require transformations of some kind. And if you want to accelerate the transformations and make the transformations more effective, you have to understand the nature of the transformation and engage with the transformation in a more systematic and strategic fashion. And when I'm saying systematic and strategic fashion, it basically is suggesting that you have to understand the nature of the transformation process in order to engage with it. So for example, here we indicated that the positive transformation, the transformation that we want, which is represented in this, on this graph with green, which basically is saying you start from a low state and then you need to rise up this curve, and all transformations end up taking this S-curve shape. And that has different phases. It has an initiation phase, it has an acceleration phase, and it has a stabilization phase. This becomes important because you can use those levers in different ways for the different phases. In other words, the kind of levers needed to initiate action are very different from the levers needed to accelerate action and the levers needed to stabilize action. At the same time, as you move towards these sustainability transformations, you're also breaking down current as unsustainable practices. And therefore, that's a destabilization that also has to be managed. So just to give you an example, if you think about our transformation of moving towards deeper penetration of renewables, the destabilization that it has to actually also deal with is the destabilization of a fossil-driven system. And the incumbents don't give up easily. So the destabilization of an existing unsustainable system is also not a trivial exercise and also needs attention and appropriate use of these levers. The nature of the transformation varies from entry point to entry point. The nature of the transformation also varies from context to context. So the same transformation in terms of thinking about the transformation to greater renewables penetration is going to play out differently in India than the US, than Morocco. So you have to understand the national context in which the transformation is playing out. You have to understand what is the domain of the transformation, and then you have to understand how to use those levers in order to drive the transformation through its various phases as quickly and as effectively as possible, right? I'll give you a very, very quick 2 or 3 examples just to illustrate the point. If you think about, again, the renewables, the earlier part of the transformation was really driven by scientific research that helped lower the costs of renewable technologies. But over time, as these technologies became closer to commercialization and practical action, then it took policy, and actually Germany was a leader in that, as everybody knows, through their own energy policies to be able to drive the implementation of this transformation and really get us going on that path. Once we started moving on that path, driven by German energy policy, then other countries actually put in their own policies to build up manufacturing capacity, China, of course, being the leader in that, but it's not the only one, that basically allowed us to move up that acceleration phase by further lowering the cost of these technologies. And we also put in other kinds of levers such as finance and all of that, capacity building. All of them acted in concert to help us move up that transformation. But the transformation took different paths. The nature of the transformation was different in different countries. So I think I want to kind of just, we have only a few minutes, so I want to kind of just leave us with these key messages that in order to accelerate the transformation, you have to understand the nature of the transformation, make sure that you're able to use a lever to drive the transformation, the positive transformation through all the phases, and also drive the destabilization transformation. The nature of the transformation will vary from entry point to entry point and vary from national context to national context. And therefore, I'll leave you with a last point that while this does require some global action, it also means that you have to do a lot of thinking at a regional and national level. Because what works for a different country does not necessarily work for all countries. And therefore, you have to be much more thoughtful and systematic in engaging with this transformation. But therefore, that's why I use the term systematic and strategic. Systematic means paying attention to the full nature of the transformation. Strategic meaning you need to think about how to actually apply the strategy for your own country. I'll stop with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sagar. Now we will hear perspectives on the German VNR process from Ms. Ilka Hirt, representing the government of Germany, BMUV. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you for having me here at such a crucial moment in time. Yes, I will speak about the German VNR, but maybe start by, I think many of you know, we had elections 12 days ago. We're in quite a critical moment in Europe right now, defending what we have and the need to be strong and to have a strong government soon again. I'm quite reassured on one hand because we have the possibility to have a stable democratic government at the center of Europe again, to have a good coalition hopefully, and also stay on our track in matters of multilateralism and international cooperation. And these are very good news for me, very important news for me. But we also have alarming signs, because I think those of you who have followed these elections, we also had quite some populist gains on the very extreme right, on the very extreme left. 25% of the German population actually votes extreme. And that's something that's alarming, and I'm not just saying it like this, because I think this is also, we can always link this to our SDG process and to the question where we are, and do we actually explain well enough what we're doing to our population? Because I think this is something that where we are not so much ahead in Germany. Ambuj even thank you for saying that we led the way to energy transition, but what we haven't been so good at these last years was actually explaining in understandable words what we're doing, and that actually protecting our environment also helps the population, also has a social aspect in it. Sometimes we just took it for granted that this is something we have to do. We have to be climate neutral we have to have energy transition, no matter how expensive maybe energy costs get. So to get on track there again, also with a stagnating economy right now in Germany as well, we really have to see that we get to balance these three pillars of the SDGs to keep on our path to really protecting the environment, becoming climate neutral, while having some economic growth again, and also keeping everybody on board socially. So we're in a very difficult moment, even in Germany right now. I wanted to say that in the beginning. Nevertheless, we are very, very excited to have our VNR process going right now. And I think the World Economic Forum Global Risks Report 2025 pointed quite a troubling picture, where environmental challenges dominate, with extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and pollution among the leading risks. And this is also something, I mean, our electoral campaign was all about security, migration, but we never heard the word environmental crises. And these crises are, I mean, one of the top risks, and the World Economic Forum is not known for being, I don't know, an environmental NGO hub, but they are getting it, and I think we need to have this in mind while creating a new government or for policymakers all over the world. And in general, the risk report revealed skepticism that current societal mechanisms and governing institutions can navigate the complexity and fragility of the risks we face today. But, and this is the good thing, the Agenda 2030 or the 2030 Agenda remains the normative framework of UN member states that charts a path for a better future for all. And I think we should stay on that path and always also work beyond that. The World Sustainable Development Summit today, and of course the annual HLPF ahead of us in July, are therefore crucial for multilateralism and to speed up implementation of the 2030 Agenda. And I'm really thankful to TERI for giving us the possibility to discuss here today. So maybe coming to our VNR, just like India and the Czech Republic and approximately 40 other states, Germany is currently in the process to prepare already its third voluntary national review, and it will be presented in July at the HLPF. It will be based on our new revised German Sustainable Development Strategy. And we took, of course, the GSDR as our guiding star for our new German strategy. Maybe to tell you about our three major ambitions doing this VNR. Firstly, in Germany, we really aim for an integrated perspective on the SDGs, and we have identified 6 transformation areas and 5 levers, a little bit as I said, as you said. One of these 6 transformation areas is the transition to a circular economy, and I really don't want to mention all of them, but circular economy for us right now is a very big priority, and we also feel that we have a lot of interest in other countries to work together on this. Germany has taken a big step in its own way to a circular economy, because we published, or we adopted a national circular economy strategy last December, still with the old government, so let's hope that the new government will also follow this strategy. Secondly, and this is really important for me, based on our national indicator report, we will present a chapter that reflects our national challenges on implementation. And this is meant to support an honest and self-critical reporting and peer learning on best practices and systemic challenges, because there's no real gain if you just go to the HLPF and say, we're on track with everything is great in our country, and then it's done. I do think we all can do some self-criticism and see where the challenges are and be honest to each other, and this is what we are really striving to do. And thirdly, very important, based on participation in our national sustainable development strategy, we aim for participatory reporting and implementation of SDGs by a multiple set of exchange formats and by written input by external stakeholders, NGOs, to the VNR. With this, we really want to underline the importance for social discourse and integration of civil society in the implementation efforts, and this is also where comes the link to my statement in the beginning, to get society on board with this. We really look forward to sharing with and learning from all other VNR countries presenting this year. Also, of course, during the second global workshop of DESA that will be held in April in Berlin and hosted by Germany, and I hope many of you will be there, of course. And one very short last word, international cooperation is of course key for sustainable development, and India and Germany have been cooperating closely within the framework of the International Climate Initiative, the ICI, since its start in 2008, and India has been a long-term partner of the ICI and our ministry, and we are ready to continue this and really hope for very good discussions here, and of course draw your attention to the ICI booth outside there. Dear colleagues and friends, we really need an ambitious international sustainability policy, decisive action, and integrated approaches. And as we all know, this decade will be pivotal as the world will be and is already confronted with increasingly complex global risks. So exchanges like ours today can help discuss current challenges and progress, and also strengthen our mutual understanding in order to accelerate the SDG implementation. So on behalf of the German Environment Ministry, I would like to express once again my sincere appreciation to TERI for organizing this event, and of course to all of you for attending today, even though the sun is shining outside, and participating in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hirt, for the insightful discussions, and we are also very thankful to BMUV IKI as well as Government of Germany for this session. To provide a practical perspective, we now have a case study on mountain ecosystems and SDG acceleration presented by Ms. Nameeta Prasad, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India.
Very warm good afternoon to everybody, and thank you very much, TERI, for inviting me and being part of this wonderful discussion that we are having. I'm sorry I won't be able to stay for the session after this, but I also wanted to talk about the mountain ecosystems and how we in the ministry are taking ahead or trying to take ahead this issue about reconciling development imperatives with the environmental perspectives, keeping in mind the fragility of the Himalayan ecosystem. And today I will share a case study on the mountain ecosystems, that is the Indian Himalayas, to illustrate how we can accelerate sustainable development goals implementation while meeting climate and biodiversity targets. And as you know, the Himalayas, which are located in the northern part of India, for people who don't know much about that, they are called the water towers of Asia, because all the major rivers have their source in that in the glaciers which lie in the Himalayas. And they directly sustain over 240 million people, and it's recognized as a global hotspot for flora as well as fauna. A scientific assessment has warned that even if we manage to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, we will still lose 1/3 of the Himalayan glaciers by 2100. Such glacier retreat threatens the water supply for millions of people downstream and increases the risks of glacier lake outburst floods and landslides in the mountains, and which we're already facing now with the recent incidents of Glof and the landslides which are happening much more frequently every monsoon in the Himalayas. That is why the Government of India accords highest priority to safeguarding Himalayan ecosystems through a multitude of initiatives. Also, we recognize that accelerating progress on SDGs in the mountain region requires breaking silos and integrating climate as well as biodiversity action into development planning. First, I would like to talk about the actions related to scientific conservation and restoration. Our premier institutes, the Botanical Survey of India and the Zoological Survey of India, provide the knowledge base to protect the mountain regions' biodiversity. India harbors almost 45,500 plant species, which is 7% of the world's plants, 28% of which are endemic. That means they happen only in India. And much of this wealth is in the Himalayas. In fact, the majority of new species discovered in recent years have come from the mountain regions. This continued exploration fuels conservation planning, from identifying key habitats to discovering climate-resilient crop wild relatives. We in the ministry also pair in situ efforts with ex situ conservation. And since 1992, the ministry has a special program called Assistance to Botanical Gardens, which has supported over 350 botanical gardens across India as living repositories of threatened plants. These gardens not only do research and seed banking and propagation of the rare Himalayan flora, but also link conservation with local livelihoods. By saving medicinal herbs, endemic trees, we safeguard ecosystem services and create sustainable jobs in nursery management and ecotourism. This exemplifies SDG 15, which is merged with SDG 8, which is decent work. The next area I would like to highlight is climate adaptation and the ecosystem resilience. Mountain communities are on the front line of climate change, from melting glaciers to erratic monsoons. Our approach under what we in the ministry have a National Mission for Himalayan Studies has been to integrate scientific research with community-based action. For For example, long-term ecological monitoring plots have been established in Uttarakhand region to track climate impacts on the alpine ecosystems. This initiative is building a robust database of Himalayan flora and fauna, as well as the climate trends, which can enable informed decision-making. Such data helps local authorities develop adaptation plans, like early warning systems for glacial lake outburst floods or climate-smart agroforestry, aligning SDG 13 with SDG 2 and SDG 15. Another innovative case is the spring revivals in the mid-Himalayan regions. Using sustainable land management, pilot projects in Uttarakhand have rejuvenated dried springs, ensuring water security for villagers. This improves health, gender equity, as well as climate resilience, all at once, by treating development, which is water supply, farming, disaster risk reduction, as well as environment, which is reforestation and soil conservation, as two sides of the same coin. These projects deliver co-benefits and is a template for integrated SDG delivery. Another focus area for us is the environmental education and sustainable lifestyles, or the Mission Life, which is a mass movement for sustainable living, envisioned by a Prime Minister and launched with the UN Secretary General in October 2025. Mission Life urges simple everyday actions, saving energy, using public transport, saying no to single-use plastic, that can collectively make a big impact. By nudging millions towards mindful consumption, we address climate change as well as resource use, which is SDG 12 and 13, while improved well-being. As the UN resident coordinator noted, life aligns development and climate agendas by harnessing the power of individual for behavior change. In mountain states, Mission Life has inspired community-led campaigns for clean rivers and forests, merging traditional knowledge with modern sustainability concepts. Importantly, these approaches show that SDGs, climate, and biodiversity goals can be mutually reinforcing and not competing. By conserving ecosystems, we secure long-term water, food, and disaster protection for the communities. By empowering these communities with knowledge and new livelihood options, we ensure conservation efforts are equitable and long-lasting. This synergy is at the heart of a mountain case study and offers lessons for other regions facing the triple crisis of poverty, climate change, as well as nature loss. Further, achieving transformative change in mountain ecosystems requires broad partnerships across governments, academia, private sector, as well as civil society. India has been actively forging and participating in such coalitions to accelerate SDG action with agencies like ICIMOD and CDRI. Partnerships at the grassroots as well as knowledge levels are crucial. We work closely with NGOs, universities, and local communities to ensure solutions that are socially inclusive and science-based. We also encourage academia, private sector linkages to innovate for mountains. For instance, we have funded startups developing glacier monitoring drones or off-grid solar cold storage for farmers. In summary, by creating a multi-stakeholder alliance, be it a transboundary wildlife agreement for the red panda in the eastern Himalayas or a corporate NGO partnership to promote ecotourism, we unlock new resources and expertise. Partnerships expand the pie of what is possible, ensuring sustainable development is not an isolated government mandate, but also a shared mission of all institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the Himalayas teach us that human well-being and nature's well-being are one and the same thing. We accelerate SDG implementation. We have to ensure that climate and biodiversity goals remain at the core of our efforts, not as afterthoughts. The case of mountain ecosystems show that this integration is not only possible, but immensely rewarding, yielding water security, clean energy, disaster resilience, jobs, and the rich natural heritage for our future generations. My call to action is threefold. First, let us scale up innovative pilots. What works in one valley could be expanded across all mountain regions, and indeed other fragile ecosystems. Second, every stakeholder should join the mission. I encourage our friends in the private sector to invest in mountain-friendly infrastructure and offset their footprint through schemes like the Green Credits and the EcoMark certified products, which the ministry has also initiated. I urge civil society and academia to continue partnering with governments in research and community mobilization. Your expertise and grassroots reach are invaluable. And thirdly, we in the policy sphere must continue to reform and reinforce the enabling environment, aligning policies, removing obstructive incentives, and instituting accountability for SDG outcomes on climate and biodiversity. The ministry will do its part by strengthening our institutions, expanding environmental education from eco-clubs in schools to public campaigns on emission lives, and ensuring that the climate and biodiversity commitments are front-loaded in development programs. In conclusion, let us remember that mountains are early warning systems for our planet. What happens in Himalayas or the Andes will affect us eventually, and they foreshadow the world of tomorrow. If we can secure a sustainable, prosperous future for our mountain communities, we will be well on our way to achieving the 2030 agenda globally. The time to accelerate transformation is now. Let us commit to a future where our development is in harmony with nature, for the sake of our mountains and for all of our sakes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Prasad. We now move on to our panel discussion. Our esteemed panelists are Mr. David Surý, Director General of Environmental Protection Section, Ministry of Environment of the Czech Republic, Professor Ambuj Sagar, International Group of Scientists for the GSDR, and to take the discussions forward, To take the discussions forward, I now hand over to our moderator, Dr. Manish Anand, Senior Fellow, Research Efficiency and Governance, TERI. Over to you, Mr. Manish.
Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you. As you know, we are running short of time also, and we have one panelist who has not turned up. So that way, it's good that we will have we will get to hear more from these two panelists. So as we all know, in the welcome remarks and the keynote, the emphasis has been on how to accelerate transformations and all. And this is a key issue which the world, the global community is struggling, and all the stakeholders are struggling in terms of how to accelerate transformations. And to accelerate transformations, we need to ensure that we accelerate actions on all fronts. And here the 3 I's of actions are very important, that it should be integrated, it should be more in terms of implementable, and it should be more in terms of impactful. And also there's another I of immediacy, because we are running short of time. We are already now we have 5 years left for the 2030 agenda deadlines and all, and whatever we need to do has to be in the immediate short-term action which needs to be undertaken. Professor Sagar in his deliberation has touched about the GSDR, the process, and it is very beautifully outlined more in terms of the nature of transformation which needs to be undertaken and the stages also. So the stylized model which you have showcased and which is illustrated in the report gives a very nice entry point, and the levers, the 5 levers which you talked about, the governance, economy and finance, science and technology, then collective action, and also the issue of capabilities, which I'm very happy that it got inducted in the 2023 report as the 5th lever. So that gives a very nice entry point to analyze how the nature of transformations which we are talking about. So just more in terms of to begin with, I'd request the panelists more in terms of to first of all reflect on the need for the integrated approach in terms of when we are talking about the SDG implementation vis-a-vis the climate actions which is needed, and also the biodiversity. So I see a lot of synergies and institutional happening across the SDG and the climate, but less so on the front of biodiversity, which has also started recently. But at least we have this SDG and climate synergy platform, which is being coordinated by UNDESA and UNFCCC, so which gives a forum for analyzing and at that level. But similarly, in the biodiversity front, we don't have that kind of platform which exists. But nonetheless, as we all know, we are talking about nature, and as UNEP chief has very rightly talked about, nature is an insurance policy against the visible, invisible, gases which are causing much of visible damages. So the nature is at the core, and we need to bring in that element. So having said that, I would request the panelists to just touch upon more in terms of the opportunities and challenges in terms of when we are talking about having an integrated kind of approach in meeting and aligning these goals of biodiversity, then climate, and the SDG targets. Yeah, so that.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, SDGs provide a comprehensive framework. We have SDG 13 dedicated to climate action, and other SDGs focus on the biodiversity protection, but we must understand that these SDGs don't work separately. Yeah. They are closely interlinked. To better align SDGs implementation with climate and biodiversity protection, integrate governance, innovation, and inclusive social policies must work in tandem. The Czech Republic approach highlights the importance of coordinated action across institutions and also local engagement and local municipalities, technology advancement, and also international collaboration to drive impact and sustainable outcomes. Policy coherence play a crucial role in achieving SDGs and so climate protection. So if our policies are not coherent, they may cause serious negative impact on climate, nature, and also businesses and our other society, and this applies to all our policies, environment, social and economic. On the contrary, the coherent policies work together effectively and bring request, solution and synergies. Yeah. Particularly, we focus on greening our industry and improving circular economy measures such as recycling and waste management, renewable energy. It minimizes the need for sources extraction, and it has positive impact in lowering CO2 emission and preserving clean and safe nature environment without waste and landfills. Maybe one point for each voluntary initiative, we need the clean data, reliable data, and the data which can we trust, because it's necessary to that clean table with the clean data.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add a few words on this question about interlinkages and thinking about an integrative approach. I mean, I'll just maybe use build on the example I'd given earlier about the clean energy transition. The clean energy transition is primarily currently really was initially being driven really mainly by climate goals, right? It was about decarbonization and protecting the climate system. I think as Ilka made the point, in the end, this while science and technology helped bring down the costs of energy technologies and made them a kind of a viable alternative to fossil fuels, it really did still need a greater kind of a social buy-in, and that had to happen with understanding that there are winners and losers in this transition, and therefore the clean energy transition now also globally the word just has been added, because with the understanding that you have to think about questions relating to livelihoods, which is another SDG. But if you think about the clean energy transition, if it's driven mainly only by climate change and forgets energy access, then we are missing out an opportunity to provide clean energy to large numbers of people across the world, the absence of which has huge health implications because of, for example, household air pollution through the use of not clean cooking energy. It has gender implications because this current models of household cooking energy based on biomass actually affects women and girl children much more. And therefore one has to understand that depending on how you frame the nature of the action and how broadly you think about the action, you can exclude potential gains, or if you're doing it right, you're able to, in an integrative fashion, make sure that you can, using the opportunities available to us, make significant progress on multiple goals at the same time. Unfortunately, this kind of integration does not happen as often as it should, partly because the communities are siloed. There are people who think about climate change, don't necessarily think about energy access. The people who think about energy access are not necessarily thinking about how different kinds of energy access and how do you do it in different parts of the world and all of that. So it really is a challenge to us to think about how do you step back and, taking a bigger picture perspective, frame the action in a way that really does allow this integrative and broader approach that allows gain on as many SDGs as possible, rather than only doing it slice by slice. I'll just stop with that because I know we have limited time.
Yeah, you answer.
Yes, at first I didn't want to be so dominant. This is why I left the table, and then I saw only men are left. And since this is also an SDG, gender equity, I thought I'd come back. So, yeah. So maybe just, well, to try to answer your question about biodiversity and how can we maybe achieve more interlinkage in the field of biodiversity. This is also a question, I mean, we are discussing a lot in our ministry, and you're absolutely right. I mean, already how governments, national governments are not set up really to have this integrated discussion. We do have the overall management of the national sustainability strategy in the Chancellery, which is theoretically a good thing, but in practice, I think we can still, we have a way to go. And in terms of biodiversity, I thought that the approach that Brazil is taking is quite interesting to have this bioeconomy approach. Not for like big companies, but really for local communities and people on the ground to like create livelihoods for them in a clean and prosperous environment, to keep, I don't know, the forest standing while having some social stability in it. So what they did last year during their G20 presidency was quite promising. I mean, of course, it's still the beginning, and we have to think more. And coming from the environment ministry, I'm always also a little bit skeptical of too much enthusiasm for bioeconomy because we don't want to sell out nature. We don't want to have greenwashing, and it really has to be in respecting nature, but I do think this is a way to go in order to have the population on board with what we want to protect.
Yeah. Thanks for those. In fact, Professor Sagar, you have raised a very important point. Looking at the interlinkages at the different levels is very important, and also obviously sectoral, cross-sectoral linkages becomes very important. We did a exercise on looking at the SDG interlinkage in the agriculture sector, and we came out with, and looking at all the 169 targets, and the findings were we saw a lot of synergies. Say in 135 targets there were synergies, 5 or 6 targets there were like more in trade-offs, but delinks were also there. So more in terms of identifying at that level, and that for different sectors and all, it becomes very important. Having said that, since it's also more in terms of a top-driven and also a bottom-up approach where we need lot of local action as well. So here I'd like to hear from David regarding his experience in terms of the governance of such issues, alignment, when we are talking about the SDGs, climate goals, and biodiversity. What sort of governance issues and challenges do you see more in from the national, sub-national perspective? And also when we are talking, since we are talking with the international frameworks and all, so there are lessons and learning. But I'll come to that to Professor Sagar to throw more insights on that, because he's a part of the international expert group on this GSDR report writing. So you'll be also request you to focus more on that. So David, maybe you can just, if you can provide some insights from your Czech Republic also in terms of how you have trying to integrate and align this.
Thank you. For us, it's very important cooperation between our colleagues from Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Region Affairs, Ministry for Regional Development, and Office of Government, and also Czech Statistical Office, because we work intensively on review. We acknowledge that VNR demands great collaborative work, actually, and we include citizen, expert, business, representative, and youth also process via roundtables and consultation. So this is very important for us. Get together on lots of stakeholders and collaborate on the lots of tasks. Each action which we have around in SDGs. We apply through subsidies, through law, and some regulation also as well. And actually, therefore, from apart evaluation process toward SDGs, we focus on three sector challenges: decarbonization and just transition, because we have lots of funds on the transition and decarbonization. And also resilient society, as you mentioned, for us is very important. Be resilient against greenwashing, misinformation, disinformation, and as well. And sustainability in the daily life. Be prepared on the damage. Be prepared on the actions. So this is our access.
Thank you. Professor Sagar, maybe you'd like to highlight, because in terms of the SDG writing, the report writing process also, you must have come across these interlinkages, looked at the interlinkages, but I'm not sure more in terms of how much biodiversity was also at the center when we were trying to look at these issues and aspects. So maybe if you can highlight that as well, and maybe how we are planning to move ahead.
So, I mean, actually, to be honest, in our report, we did not look at the individual entry points or transformation areas, but we were really interested in thinking about the common underlying principles, so that it didn't become we didn't want to make it a report about 6 different areas, but really how to give guidance to various actors, whether it's country governments or other entities interested in supporting the transformation, how you might be able to better support the transformation. But I think let me just suggest a couple of areas that I didn't talk about. One of the points that we mentioned is that it's the role of science in underpinning these transformations, and science is very important to helping us understand these interlinkages, right? As to what, as you said, what the synergies are, where is that you can get multiple benefits from action, where is that you have actually trade-offs, where do you have constraints. Science plays a really important role. So part of what we actually said, it's really a challenge to scientists in each of these domain areas to put out the knowledge that will help us advance the action. I'll just give you a very quick example. There's a big conversation now about nature-based solutions in the climate area. And frankly, I don't think there's enough science out there to help us understand what is the extent to which nature-based solutions can really make a difference. In the climate models, basically that's residual. So you're kind of saying that, okay, nature will help nature take care of that. But there's new science that actually showing that we may not be able to get the kind of climate benefits that we are hoping for from the nature-based solutions. So I think even in terms of thinking about these interlinkages, I think science plays a really important role. So maybe I'll just leave it at that. And I noticed that a couple of people had questions earlier, so I do want to kind of make sure that we have a chance to let people ask questions if there are some, because whenever I'm sitting in a audience of a panel discussion, I get very frustrated if the audience doesn't get a chance to
fall
yeah.
asleep after.
Yeah.
Then you fall asleep after a while because people on the stage are talking to each other.
No, yeah, I think we'll have time for question answer session as well, and I think that I'm also looking forward and request colleagues to just jot down more in terms of the questions and be specific and be pointed also. Maybe Ilka, you would also like to highlight, maybe you have talked about a little bit more in terms of how the German government process in terms of the governance structure is all inclined towards this alignment aspect when we are talking about, and how it's looking at the accelerated actions which needs to be undertaken. I know Germany is at the forefront, and obviously recycling and all is a very good case study, circularity and all, but maybe, yeah, you'll highlight.
Yes, governance structure is always an interesting question. Maybe let me start with, we have a wording problem, because the electoral campaign of the CDU, the Friedrich Merz, he published his strategy, and it was called Agenda 2030, but it had nothing to do with our 2030 agenda. So now we feel that that the Agenda 2030 is more now known as the program of our new chancellor than. Which can be good and bad, but so just a little joke in front. I think in terms of governance, we have quite a good structure in Germany with, I said, with the chancellery. So the top of the political power being in charge of managing and coordinating the implementation of the SDGs all across the German government. That said, I also said that this is a good theoretical governance structure, but then I was sort of, well, sometimes we have to like report to that structure, and it's very formalized and it's very complicated, and in the end you have a big report and it's so boring, and it doesn't really, I don't know how to really make it live in the different ministries. So every ministry in our government also has a sustainability, how do you call it, Beauftragter, sustainability commissioner. And some take it very serious and really work on it, but then we also have some where you rather think that they try to destroy everything. So it's also a question of how much is the ministry on board with it. I don't have a perfect answer to this. I think our governance structure is a good one, but it has to be lived.
Yeah, thanks for that. In fact, why I talked about governance and why this is a key issue also when we talk about this alignment and integrated action, because obviously it's more about the different sort of actors who are involved at different levels. So, and emphasizing not like only on the local level actions, but also the international actions. And when we look at the history of this evolution of these frameworks and all, it all originated from, say, 1992. I see that as a point where it all started, and this United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in 1992 had this fantastic 5 documents, like Agenda 21 was there, then CBD also came out of it, then UNFCCC also was there. So, and then it took all these frameworks and conventions, it took its own course. And now we are in the process of more in terms of again trying to see how these converge and integrated actions are needed. And we have seen like from the experiences and all. So at that level, this thinking has come, but obviously when we are talking about the local level, the subnational level, the actions, are they integrated? Are they? So looking at the India, we have different nodal ministries like Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, who looks after, say, the climate change, biodiversity issues and all. But then we have the Niti Aayog, which is more in terms of the focus about SDG implementation, and Ministry of Statistics, Planning and Implementation. So there is, but then also at the subnational level, where the main thing happens in India is the issues in terms of the coherence and synergies between the departments and the sectors, where, and so that's why this challenge. So in that, innovation becomes very important. Innovative approaches becomes very important. You have highlighted nature-based solutions, circular economy model, climate smart agriculture. These are all coming up in a big way. So more in terms of as a way forward, I'd like to elicit your responses on these. Like, how do you see these innovative approaches, like contributing to such aspirations which we are heading towards? So maybe you can reflect more in terms of the need for such innovative approaches and how they could be mainstreamed. David?
Maybe I'll just take a stab at it while David is putting his thoughts together. I think, I'm an academic, so my perspective on these kind of issues is, I would say two different things. One is, innovation is all fine, but one has to be very careful in understanding the implications of transformative change. In other words, I think this question, I mean, if you think about, for example, nature-based solution as let's say an innovative solution, I think we really have to be careful in saying, as you start scaling up the solution, how do you really understand the implications in the right manner? So in other words, I think, again, if you're thinking about the different stages of the transformation, it's to understand that as you go deeper into the transformation, you may actually be coming up with different system level effects that you don't anticipate from the get-go. And so in that sense, I think, and by the way, any good innovation has that kind of as a thing, that you really need to be very careful in moving forward and being able to reiterate and being able to take a critical perspective instead of treating it as a blank check. So as an academic, I think that's what at least our view generally is, that's the role of science in making sure that you actually have a good understanding of what's going on. I'll go back to this example of clean cook stoves, right? For many years, we were actually talking about cleaner biomass cook stoves as an innovative answer to solve the problem of dirty cook stoves. Well, it turned out that while it was being celebrated as a great answer, when you did the more careful science on it, you began to understand that it really did not offer the kind of the health benefits that it was supposed to be offering. So in other ways, I think it's all fine to actually experiment with new ideas, but one also has to be very careful to understand the implications and therefore scale up. If you're going to scale up, you have to scale up very carefully. Alternately, if you talked about sustainable agriculture, you have to understand why is it that what seems like a really innovative and sensible idea is not scaling up fully. What is stopping the scaling up? So if an innovation that seems too good to be true, there's no reason why we should not be moving towards sustainable agriculture. If it's not happening, then you have to understand what's going on. So I think each of these issues is highlighting that as you think about the greater penetration of an innovation into society, you do need to be much more careful understanding what might be the implications be as a penetration becomes deeper, or if the innovation is not diffusing, then what actually is going on. And that's actually the nature of the world, right? And again, as I said earlier, this also plays out differently in different contexts, so you really need not just one set of global analyses, but you really have to have a sense of how it's playing out in different contexts, regions, countries, and even at the subnational scale.
Yeah, thanks. David or Ilka, you'd like to?
Yes, thank you. Maybe a few points. Innovation is awesome. We need innovation for moving forwards. But if we have changing everything so fast, and also legislation, because what we talk about in the European Commission, that we have lots of things to do, and we still changing something. So if innovation will be so fast, we have to adapt to some regulation, some law, and innovation is more forward for us, and market it's not set up for this. Yeah, so we have to learn and find some mistakes also, because mistakes is not our enemies. Mistakes is our friend, because we can learn from this.
Yeah. Ilka, you'd like to say, or maybe?
No, I think we can take
we can take. Thanks for those. And I think that brings a very important point, what you are talking about, the value trade-offs, the inherent value trade-offs when we are talking about the different goals and the synergies. And that has not been adequately addressed. But I'd also like, before opening, like more in terms of on the floor, to the floor, your aspect also on the role of private sector, how important is that? Because innovation in terms of, you have talked about, the report is also talking about very nicely the emergence, acceleration and stabilization phase, and also consequently for the bad innovations needs to be phased out. So breakdown and destabilization and that kind of framework and all. So, and in different contexts and different sectors, it will play out in different manner at different scales. Say in the case of agriculture in India, we had the destabilization is also not because of the political lobbying and all this. It's not happening at that rate at which the emergence of new innovations would happen. So that's there. So the role of private sector and the finance becomes very important from that perspective. Maybe you'd like to reflect on this, or we open the floor for question and answer. We open it for question and answer, and then you can get. Yeah, yeah.
We can also try to
Right.
this into the
So maybe then I'd request to have very focused question, and maybe if you'd like to focus it to any of the panelists, you're most welcome, or your general observation also will do. Thank you.
Ambuj sir, you talked about deep decarbonization, and Ilka mentioned about onboarding of different stakeholders. I just wanted to have this combination statement. How about deep onboarding of the stakeholders? So what do we actually do related to that?
You know, again, it goes back to actually maybe thinking about this is a chance to bring in the question of the private actors, right? In the end, the question is you have to kind of understand what is the role and the interest of different stakeholders in this process, right? So, for example, if your stakeholders who are part of the decarbonization story, especially private actors, where they actually feel that I'm a for-profit and I can actually make money from the decarbonization imperative, then their deep onboarding is enabled by creating markets for those kind of, for example, renewable or energy efficiency products and all of that, right? So where governance can play a role is then effectively creating an opportunity to align the public interest of climate mitigation with their interest of profit motive, right? So that allows naturally kind of a deep onboarding. The question is much more critical when you're talking about onboarding of people whose interests are contrary in many ways to the broader interest, in this case, let's say climate mitigation, right? Where you're actually seeing oil firms are now rolling back their promises to start moving towards net zero, right? Deep onboarding of those players whose interests are not aligned with the direction which we want to move for sustainability is a much more tricky challenge. And in fact, that also goes back to the question of the innovation question. You know, innovation always creates winners and losers. And the only way innovation generally moves forward is not only the onboarding of the winners, but also making sure that those losers are not feeling left out from the conversation. And that's why when I talked about just transition has become very much a part of the global narrative, because people began to understand that onboarding of, in that case, the losing workers was absolutely critical to driving the transformation. You are talking about persuading society of the benefits of their action. It's actually also thinking about onboarding of actually societal actors, not just private actors. So it actually becomes a much more complicated conversation, and that's why you really do have to think about engaging with the range of stakeholders and understanding their interests and trying to figure out how to speak to them and how to make sure either they understand the value proposition of the transformation for them, or in some ways try to make sure that the interests of those who are going to be disadvantaged are taken care of somehow or the other. And that's really the kind of challenges where I think we are dealing with right now in multiple of these transformational areas.
Thank you, sir. Can I have a follow-up?
Sure.
So, I was in a different discussion in the last session. So it was talking about access to the capital to MSMEs and SMEs to really help them to move into the climate space so that we have a transition towards that. So it was talk about capital, however, I was missing the talk about the behavioral change, the challenges at the behavior level that those MSMEs may be feeling at this moment. So is there any addressal towards that?
Well, it's a more complicated question because I think it's more than just finance and behavior change. It again is trying to understand what their interests are and how to make sure that you are able to align their interests with the transformation you're interested in. So if you're talking about decarbonization in MSMEs, you have to understand that MSMEs want to continue as thriving entities. And how do you enable them to continue on as thriving entities while contributing to decarbonization? Then you have to really understand why is it they're not able to do it by themselves? Whether it's finance, but I would actually say it's much more than finance. It is access to the right kind of technology. It's actually building the right kind of capabilities. And you have to align all of those resources, levers that I was talking about, in order to allow them to be part of the transformational process, right? And that's where public policy becomes important. And the reality is, so far in the climate arena, we've not paid as much attention to MSMEs. Most of the focus really has been on the larger entities for multiple reasons, but as much as anything else, because actually building the capabilities of MSMEs to engage in the transformation is much more of a difficult challenge. But again, you have to align their interests. You have to actually understand that they want to thrive as small corporate entities, and if they want to thrive in a decarbonizing future, you have to enable and support them in the transformation. So that kind of capacity building, finance, technology, governance, all of that become levers, and understand how do you actually design the levers in order to provide them the right kind of support.
Any more questions? You'd like to? Yeah.
Some small add. It's polarization. We have regulation and subsidies. It's the way how can we connection with partnership across stakeholders with SDG. We know that sustainable development can be achieved without private sector. It's true, yeah, because and also will be much more expensive without private sectors. But what is problem is that this business model not working like in the carbonization model, because it's like you should turn the helm, yeah, big boat, and after that the fruit you will see maybe after 10 years. So this business model is quite a different, yeah. So maybe this is the reason why is some investor is more skeptical and more careful.
Okay, you would also like to comment? Yeah. So, any further questions?
Good afternoon. My question is towards Professor Ambuj. Sir, you talked about rise of sustainable systems in different kind of phases, in 3 phases, and you also talked about 6 kind of levers. So, what are the prominent levers for each of those phases?
Sorry, what was the question? Sorry, what are
the most prominent levers for each of those phases?
You know, I think it's difficult to say which lever is more prominent. I mean, all the levers play different kind of roles, right? So it's, and again, as I said, it varies very much from context to context. So if I go back to example, the MSMEs, I would suggest that capacity building probably is a critical lever. Capacity building may not be as much of a lever if you're talking about a large private actor. For Tata Steel, I would be less worried about thinking about how to build their capacity, right? So I think instead of actually saying that which is the one lever that is universally the most prominent, I think one has to really understand, as I go back to the point I'd made, which is if you really understand the nature of the transformation process that's required to achieve your goals, and then in your specific context, then understand in which phase of the transformation, which lever plays a more important role. All levers will play an important role, but some levers may be more important than others. So for example, in the early stage, finance may be less important because you really need money. Let's say if you're talking about technological innovation, you need money for research to drive the technology forward. But as you start scaling up and manufacturing, you need much larger amounts of capital. So then finance starts playing a much more prominent role. So it really is, you have to actually really, in a sense, analytically think about the transformation process and use that to actually understand the role of the levers and which lever is particularly critical in that transformation, in that context. So I think the main point I want to again take away is that we're just providing in that report analytical framework, but which we hope will be useful to national governments and other actors. But it does put the burden of the thinking on the folks who are helping drive the transformation. There's no simple answer. There is no little cheat sheet that you can say, just focus on capacity and your problem is all solved. You really have to think much more carefully about the transformation process. And we do have examples, including in India, where this has happened very successfully. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency has done some very, very interesting things in driving transformation processes very systematically and strategically. For example, in energy efficient appliances or industrial energy or LEDs, all of that, it actually was a very carefully designed transformation process. So we have examples there where entities in different parts of the world have been able to drive the transformation process, but I think it also illustrates you do require that kind of careful thinking in that contextual space.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions? Or maybe we can, yeah, sure. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a teacher from Delhi Public School, Faridabad. And with everybody here from various stakeholders present here, when we talk about SDGs, we teach them, we try to implement them, and we try to guide children. Rather, I'll be proud to say that we at DPS integrated SDGs in our curriculum. So the children are not just reading about them, they are following them, they are practicing them. I would look forward to opportunity where children could be, made a part of such initiatives. Because when we don't focus on them and we just plan and do and come up and discuss, until and unless the future leaders are made a part of such discussions, such actions, I really doubt if the change can really happen. So looking forward to opportunities where children could be involved, and I'm pretty sure that the change will happen. Thank you so much. Good day.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'd urge if anybody has pertinent questions, you may please continue after the session breaks out with the respective speaker and all. So we had a very good, more in terms of coverage of how we are trying to look at this alignment process and what sort of actions need to be undertaken. And I know in this time frame, it's very difficult to delve into each and every aspect in a very nuanced and, so to say, manner. But nonetheless, the point remains for all the stakeholders, and for that integrated action is the need of the hour. And also, so how to hold that synergies and all becomes very important in that respect. And as we are heading towards more in terms of the 2030, and we are, to be blunt enough, we can say we are off the track in terms of achieving the SDGs. Only 13.4% of the SDG targets have been more in the green or have been met, and we have only 5 years left. So we are largely off the track, but it's more important that we are in the right direction, so to say, and that is very important. So, but now there is more about how we can bring coherence in our actions and synergies. So with this, I will like to close this panel discussion, and I'd request Ilka to just present her concluding remarks.
Yes, I'll stay here. And actually, I don't really feel like summarizing everything that we've said, also because I tried to listen what was being said. So I want to take up what the friend teacher just said, what was really moving, and it's also my own experience. Well, and it's great that you do integrate SDGs in your curriculum, because this is not a given thing. In Germany, in schools, unfortunately, it's not everywhere the case. My children, for example, my older daughter has no idea what I'm working on and what and what the SDGs are. There's nothing integrated in the curriculum. Whereas my 13-year-old son, who is at another school, just had a lesson on SDGs, and he came home and said, "Mom, did you know there's this thing, the 2030 agenda, and every country is trying to integrate?" And I was so happy when I heard this, because he was so enthusiastic about it, and they learned at school about the different countries and what levels they are at, and what countries are poor and rich, and why maybe SDGs are more advanced in such countries than in others, and what can be done. And I absolutely think you're right, that this is the way forward, because if we want to take all of society on board, it's in schools that we have to start, because you have poor children in school, rich children in school. Everybody should go to school, hopefully can go to school, and this is much easier to really get this in mind than with us in the adult stage, where everybody has their own interests and maybe follows, as a government, only one perspective. So thank you so much for this. It gives hope.
And our heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers and panelists for their time and insights. A special thanks to BMUV, ICI and TERI for organizing this crucial discussion. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. We hope today's session has provided valuable takeaways for advancing SDGs. Please explore the exhibition area. Wishing you a great day ahead. Thank you.